Hello and welcome to a Team Moray Robotics event recap. On February 20th, I competed at Robot Conflict at Motorama 2026 with my Antweight combat robot, Moray. Yes, this is the event where the infamous first Deadite fights happened, but now you can find out what happened the day before, on Friday, which is when the full combat Ant and Fairy tournament take place. I'm sure most of you watching this know Moray. By the end of 2025, Moray had started to see some major success, having an undefeated run in Macro and taking home its first place trophy. After that event, Moray struggled a little bit, going 1-2 at Rabid the next weekend and 2-2 at Rabid the week before Motorama. It was still clearly a good robot that put up a fight and got some wins, but I was surprised at how Moray's great win streak ended after only one event. Durability-wise, I was extremely happy with Moray, but the big issue came from its weapon. The disc wasn't delivering hits like I thought it would, but way more importantly, it broke twice in one event. The Grade 5 titanium design I had used for the disc since May of 2025 finally took serious damage when the two copies of it snapped at the tooth at Rabid's Cupid Carnage. After it happened, I feel like I shouldn't have been too surprised considering how thin crucial parts of it were. I had an idea for a new AR500 spinner design that should be much better, but the problem was that I had just lost both copies of Moray's weapon less than a week before I had another event. That's right, Cupid Carnage was on the 14th and Motorama was on the 20th, which gave me 5 days in between to come up with an idea for what to do with Moray. Designing a new weapon wouldn't take more than a few hours, max, but obtaining that weapon was the problem. There was no way Sen could manufacture and ship a new weapon in that amount of time. Maybe if I rush ordered it, it could have shown up, but I didn't want to spend that money. Plus, I needed time to test it once it arrived. My only option was to work with what I had. At Cupid Carnage, I considered making an on-the-spot fork setup when both discs broke before Thomas gave me one of his test blades. I decided to take that idea and make a proper configuration out of it. I had quite a few AR500 forks laying around from when I did Slice Post 31, so I designed a mounting setup to securely attach them to the front of Moray. It was a last-minute design, but as I worked on it and the event got closer, I started to feel fairly good about this version of Moray. I was happy with the mounting piece, which had some additional TPU forks attached to it, and the piece attached to the chassis in two directions, hopefully making it very secure. The lack of a heavy metal spinner, weapon motor, and not so heavy weapon ESC gave me a lot of weight to work with and allowed Moray to be within weight with 3mm thick AR500 forks. Not only should they be very durable for the Antweight class, but they gave Moray a crazy amount of reach. I felt confident that I would outreach any other Ant there, and I could probably be fine going head on. For horizontal spinners, I took an old aluminum wedge that was meant for a Viper kit and designed TPU arms to hold it on. The wedge stuck out past the uprights, which I would leave on Moray to let it self-right. I made sure that neither of my new configurations allowed Moray to do the thing, with all these new parts sticking out in different directions. I had to cut some TPU flaps off the wedge arms to make weight, but other than that, these new setups went together pretty well and looked just fine. The last change was this thing, which you probably notice and have been questioning by now. I misread the rules and thought that all weight classes required an active weapon. It turns out only the sportsman robots required one, and I misinterpreted that part. So thinking I needed an active weapon, I came up with this, a TPU claw on a 9-gram servo. Yes, 9 grams. This was obviously a Wino, weapon in name only. Only there's a technicality since it's an additional moving part. I wasn't going to bother designing and wasting filament on a real mounting point for it, so I taped it on with my blue double-sided tape, which I also used to attach the most important parts of Moray. This thing made Moray look so much worse than it probably was, and I think it's so funny. The arm became known as the Feather at the event, since some people thought it was an actual feather. It looked like one because the little servo was so tiny and weak that it was obvious how pathetic this weapon was. It actually gave me some annoyance because the tiny plastic-geared servo broke when I pushed the arm against the floor too much, and I had to solder a new one onto the regulator like a day before the event. I was afraid to send it into an opponent's weapon or even tap them too hard because I knew it would break and I'd have to attach another one. Before I talk about the fights, I want to say how much I love going to Motorama every year. It's a classic East Coast combat robot event held at this huge motorsports show once a year in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. It's 3 days, 1 day for ants and fairies, and 2 for the beetles and big bots, and it's just such a unique event. The atmosphere of being in this huge building with all the other motorsports is great, and it always feels like there are just a ton of people competing purely to have fun. There are always a lot of kids and families that bring kitbots or very homemade robots, and I love going to Moto every year. Though I do have to say, it started like 3 hours late this year, which I didn't love, especially since Friday's tournament went past 10 p.m., and a lot of people had to get up early to get there. I understand things happen, and it's a lot to set up an event this big, but 3 hours was not the most fun delay. Also, my soul died when the Amish pretzels weren't there this year, but at least the milkshakes made it hurt less. I just wanted to express how much I love Motorama and how much I really hope it continues for many more years. The link to their stream for the Antweight tournament is in the description.
See the thing in the reef with the big shiny teeth, that's a Moray.
Okay, I thought Moray could do decently well, but I didn't have crazy high expectations. My first opponent was Rooney, a ring spinner similar to Red Whirligig, a plant that managed to knock out Moray twice in grudge matches. I didn't feel super confident going into this one, and I knew I had to keep Moray's wedge pointed perfectly at my opponent because the plate doesn't wrap around the sides like most people's wedges. Saying that though, I did like the fact that Rooney's teeth aren't designed for cutting, which bodes well for my TPU armor. I didn't really know what to expect since this was a strange opponent and an untested setup for Moray. When the fight starts, I think I tried a box rush but got nervous I would miss and take a hit, so I changed plans and bumped Rooney twice. He rides up Moray's wedge, hits the uprights to remove an eel head, then bounces all over the place while I chase him down. I carefully line up an attack, which works out well, deflecting Rooney and allowing Moray to scoop him up a few times. Rooney struggles to spin up all the way in the corner, but even when he gets space, Moray bounces him off the wedge. He has a hard time getting off the flat side of his ring even while spinning the chassis around. Moray's right on top of Rooney when he regains control, and I deflect him into the wall and out of control again. Moray smothers Rooney and gets the world's shortest pin. I think I moved the feather slightly, but got too afraid to really do much. By now, I wasn't too worried about Rooney's weapon, since it didn't seem to be the most powerful thing, even when it got space to spin up all the way. There's a fun moment where Rooney climbs on top of Moray and launches himself at the wall. Moray stays in clear control of the fight as Rooney bounces around chaotically in various ways. He dive-bombed Moray here. Moray corrals Rooney into the corner and smacks it. And again. And again. And again. I kind of get a pin and cautiously bring down the feather. Rooney spins and Roonies all over the place while Moray stays perfectly planted to the floor. Moray gets a nice slam and a couple of deflections. I keep pinning and pushing around Rooney before the fight goes to the judges. That was a decisive win for Moray and a nice start for this new wedge config. It doesn't seem like Rooney's ring spins fast enough to do a whole lot of damage, meaning all I had to do was bump into it and it would fling itself all over the place. The most damage done was removing both eel heads. The aluminum wedge was only slightly scratched. The new add-ons make this version of Moray the best driving robot I've ever built. I guess the weight was better distributed, so chasing Rooney down and staying on top of it was fairly easy. Moray moved on to fight Misdemeanor, a horizontal disc spinner. Again, I didn't love this matchup because, as I touched on before, I had to keep the wedge pointed perfectly at my opponent because if I don't, Misdemeanor's disc might catch the TPU mounting points and tear into them. I was certainly interested to see how this wedge design would hold up for a weapon that should be more devastating than Rooney's. A disc like this should be far better at cutting through TPU. What gave me a lot of hope before the fight was that the builder of Misdemeanor said his belts were TPU, since I guess the normal ones didn't arrive in time. He said that the longest one of these belts lasted in testing was something like 7 or 10 hits. This made me feel way better because if I could take a few hits and maybe slam him weapon first into the wall, I might end up fighting a weaponless robot, and it seemed like there was a fairly high chance this would happen. When the fight starts, a very similar thing to the last fight happens when Moray rushes over, repositions itself, and slams into Misdemeanor. I turn a bit too far, letting Misdemeanor test out my TPU flaps. A very similar thing happens again, but the flaps work exactly as intended. He connects with the wedge, deflecting him, and he grazes the TPU again. Moray gets a small slam, followed by a great usage of the wedge, knocking Misdemeanor off balance and pushing into him, which lets the gyroscopic forces of his weapon take control. Moray's right there to catch him when he lands, and I go at it with the feather while pushing him into the wall. Misdemeanor gets deflected a couple times by all the front armor and makes a crucial mistake, driving backwards onto Moray's wedge. I got very excited when I realized I could push him all the way across the box and slam him weapon first into the metal kick plate. The impact was pretty big and I was hoping it would kill his weapon. Yep. That slam might have done something because one more hit takes Misdemeanor's weapon out of commission for the rest of the fight. This makes it easy to pin him and
Tap him. Aggressive tapping.
Since it was now a robot with no features made for pushing against a robot that's exclusively made for control, the whole rest of the fight, over half of it in fact, is just Moray getting a bunch of pins while tapping lightly yet furiously with the feather. In the recording of this fight, you can hear some people debating whether or not the tapper is a real feather, and I think this is where it first got its iconic nickname. The judge's decision took a while after this one.
Your winner by just decision, Moray.
That went about as well as it could have, with lots of control from Moray and a good showing from the wedge. The wedge mounts took only very minor damage that doesn't affect their functionality. My favorite bit is this spot here with a perfectly clean hole in it. The TPU flaps were great at absorbing hits, and the wedge plate had some slightly deeper scuffs in it. The builder of Misdemeanor was nice enough to give me his weapon pulley since it cracked during our fight. I would assume this was caused by the big slam into the wall. Now at 2-0, I was starting to feel pretty good about Controlbot Moray. I loved my next matchup because it was against a fellow Controlbot, Speeder. Speeder's a super cute little lifter that I was more than happy to fight since I clearly outreached it and I knew I wouldn't take any damage fighting it. I broke out the AR forks this time, which had FingerTech wheel safety covers on them so I didn't accidentally stab anyone. When the fight starts, I pin Speeder within 2 seconds. Speeder is of course incredibly fast, but I'm able to keep my forks pointed in the right direction to stop him. After flipping himself off Moray's front, I push Speeder across the box to pin and tap.
Geek sportsman. Aggressive tapping.
Speeder appears to be so fast that it has some trouble controlling itself, allowing Moray to get more control in. It may be easy to win engagements, but Speeder's lifter and big wheels make it hard to maintain a pin. Moray gets flipped, and then Speeder's lifter hooks my exposed servo wires. I was worried this was going to break my high-tech servo setup, but it didn't cause any problems, and actually allowed Moray to get a full pin. My slower, more controlled robot gives Speeder a lot of trouble getting control himself, and he ramps off Moray's face. For some reason, a drive side goes down on Moray. I could still translate around a lot, but it was going to be really hard to do what I needed to. Speeder gets a flip and then chucks Moray into the air since I couldn't drive straight to get a pin. My only option now was to go on the defensive by rotating to point the forks at Speeder, where he still shouldn't be able to do anything against Moray's reach. It works decently well and stops Speeder from doing much. It looks like Moray's right side would start to work a little bit sometimes, but not enough for me to really control him. He flips Moray, gets hung up on the forks, and gets another good toss before the fight goes to the judges. That was a pretty close fight, but the judges gave it to Speeder. I think you could definitely make an argument for Moray winning that, since even with half drive, I was still doing alright, but the drive side going down allowed Speeder to get more lifts in the back half. It also counted pretty heavily, I'm assuming, against me damage-wise, so it makes sense that he won. I think I agree with that one. The annoying part is that there was no obvious reason for the drive troubles, and swapping the motor fixed it. Now, down in the loser's bracket, Moray had to fight another control bot, Morasmus. It has 3 thick plastic forks with 2 small metal forks mounted to each one. It didn't seem like a particularly bad matchup since I thought I had more reach, and again, it wasn't a damaging opponent, but I remember feeling very nervous. It's crazy what losing one fight does to your expectations, because now you know there's no second chance in the loser's bracket. I find myself feeling way more optimistic about fights when I go on a little winning streak in the winner's bracket, but I almost always lose a lot of that optimism when the streak is broken, and I start to get really nervous. I remember feeling a lot of that here. It looks like Morasmus is a recolor of the same team's robot Arbogast, which may be a Psycho reference. It's probably not, but that's where my horror brain went. When the fight starts, we both take some time trying to square up, and Moray gets the upper hand first by winning the ground game from the front. Morasmus counters perfectly after being released, but isn't able to maintain control over Moray. Moray charges in where our forks intertwine, and we spin around until Morasmus tries to back away. This allows Moray to easily push and get another pin. To release, I have to do this little spin, which looks kinda cool. Both of us miss each other a few times, and then Moray lines it up right. Morasmus flips itself and manages to get out of a pin early, and briefly reverse it. My TPU forks bend out of the way of my opponent's thick ones, which leads to Moray getting pushed around. I get back into control relatively quick though. The length of our forks makes it so that neither bot clearly has an advantage over the other when we go head to head. My forks get caught on bad spots on the floor though. I miss, and have a little bit of a hard time controlling Morasmus with its exposed wheels. We once again gracefully dance around, and Moray uses the only active weapon in the arena at the moment. Morasmus starts to drive backward into the wall, which I think is an attempt to self-right. Its wheels sticking out the back bounce it up a bit, but Moray coming in and flipping itself flips it back over. I prefer more of a point-and-shoot drive style as opposed to Morasmus's more active style, which works out well since Moray gets a good shove. Moray stays in control, but its right side drive starts to struggle and it fully dies right before the fight ends, allowing Morasmus to slam Moray into the wall. Since I was worried beforehand, I was satisfied with that fight. Moray won the judge's decision even though it lost the side of drive again. Fortunately, the right side drive motor died too late in the fight to affect much. Morasmus wasn't the easiest robot to control with its fast driving and exposed wheels, but Moray's reach and more controlled approach let it win most exchanges and stay on top for most of the fight. The decision was very quick, and I'm not sure if the judges knew half of Moray's drive was down. One of the Morasmus team members notices after the decision was announced and asks if it changes anything, but they say the decision is final. That doesn't confirm if the judges knew or how it did affect or would have affected the fight. I won, so it doesn't really matter, but I do wonder how that fight was scored because of the drive issues at the end. Again, the motor died for no obvious reason, which was a little bit concerning. But overall, I was pretty happy with that fight, and I think it's a solid Moray win. Moray's run continued, and now it had to fight Brutally Honest, a baby Nautiloid kit. The builder made his own recap, if you want to see that too. I was very interested to see how Moray would do against a Nautiloid since I had never fought one before. I was still kind of nervous from being in the loser's bracket, but the Morasmus win definitely quelled a little bit of that. I wasn't sure what would happen exactly, but my strategy was of course to just point the forks at him and hope I outreached him. When the fight starts, Moray's sharp fork gets stuck in a bad spot on the floor. I was really worried this might be it, but I quickly get free. Brutally Honest comes in and rips off an eel head.
Oh, jammed!
But Moray takes full control, slamming Brutally Honest into 3 of the 4 walls. Somebody really wanted me to slam him into every wall.
Okay, you got 2 walls. You got okay. All right, now
One more. Yeah, one more.
yeah!
Tap in.
Oh!
I love how much people like this version of Moray. The floor gives me some trouble, but Moray uses its reach to great effect, and then gets a pin. Moray gets another pin, and then holds Brutally Honest back with its longer forks. I get a pin, and another pin, and then a pin, and a pin, and then the right side of drive dies again, which I was very annoyed about, but I get a pin anyway. I guess my drive kind of fixes itself since I get a push, but the drive is clearly broken by the end. I'm gonna be brutally honest, Moray won the judge's decision. Up until the very end where the drive had problems again, that was a perfect fight for me. The only damage I took was an eel head being removed and the upright being slightly torn into. Moray's reach once again made it extremely difficult for its opponent to harm it. Now, after 3 fights in a row of the same drive side going down, I needed to figure out a solution. I was fortunate to have the motor die right at the end of my last 2 fights where it wasn't really going to affect much, but I couldn't keep having this happen. The time in between this fight and my next one was filled with stuff going wrong. First of all, I spent some time right after this fight talking to the Brutally Honest team, which cost me some of my repair time. Second of all, I wanted to find a new motor. I wanted to buy a replacement off somebody else, since mine kept dying and I think my spares were pretty old, so I thought a newer motor might solve the problem. Lars was nice enough to give me one in exchange for a gearbox, but after I got back to my table and installed it, I realized it had a 4mm shaft when I used 3mm. This meant I needed a hub that would fit. Once again, I went to Lars, who gave me a FingerTech hub. Since neither of us had a 4mm Roach Robotics hub, Moray would have to run a Roach wheel on one side and a FingerTech wheel on the other with some silicone on it for better traction. I realized after the event that I could have saved myself much needed repair time by using one of the 4mm hubs I had for Deadite. After screwing the top plate down, I went to twitch test the robot, and it wouldn't turn on, so I had to unscrew all the top plate screws and figure out what went wrong. If I remember correctly, a solder joint came loose on the switch, so I had to resolder that, which took more time than I would have liked. On top of all this, my next opponent was Slarby, a Palm Beach Bots undercutter kit, meaning I had to swap back to my wedge configuration. Unscrewing all the mounting screws and then screwing them back in took some time. I definitely used my one push, and I think Moray just barely got everything working in time before it was disqualified. I've been to a lot of events since this one, so I might have forgot some stuff, but I think I covered everything that set me back here. This has to be the most stressful and urgent repair time I've ever experienced. But Moray was all good to go now, with a brand new motor and the right configuration, so I walked over to the box, and you can imagine how I felt after doing all this work. I saw Slarby was modular and put its vertical spinner attachment on. As a horizontal, Slarby put up a great fight against Impulse, so I knew it might be a tough fight, but I thought I was done for when I saw it as a vert. The wedge is not a good configuration for fighting this vertical spinner version because its little wedges should be much lower than my wedge and allow him to win every exchange if we went head on. I thought my run was about to be over. I knew the only way I could win this was to outdrive him, and as we were readying up, I thought I need to drive like I've never driven before. When the fight starts, I box rush, and running into Slarby bounces him enough to get underneath and pin him. When I release, I play things super cautiously, which pays off as I drive around to the back of Slarby and get another moment of control. Slarby wheelies a bit, which helps my chances, but going head-on proves that he does get under my wedge with his, and I take a hit. Slarby capitalizes and lands the first hit to the back Moray's taken all day. I don't let this stop me though, and drive very strategically to avoid going head-on. It works as I get around to his side and get a nice pin and tap combo. I push Slarby, and my uprights help prop him against the wall to get another much-needed pin. I drive forward when I see an opportunity, but back out late enough that Slarby lands a shot that flips Moray. Fortunately, he misses the follow-up hit, letting me self-right. Slarby isn't able to get enough bite for a hit on my wedge, which is lucky, and I keep avoiding Slarby's weapon while staying aggressive. His gyro helps me out. Moray very quickly capitalizes on Slarby exposing its backside and gets a pin. We run into each other with some decent speed, which gives Slarby enough bite to flip Moray. He gets a follow-up hit that rights me. Slarby's wheelie combined with Moray's charge flips him over, where I push his weapon into the kick plate, trying to break it. I don't get to do much before Slarby gyro self-rights, and he misses an attack. Even with him under the wedge, his spinner only nicks the edge. Slarby turns too fast and flips himself, which I know is very advantageous for Moray. I wanted to feed the wedge into his weapon while he was like this, so I could pop him up into the air. When Slarby self-rights, Moray's right underneath and pushes him across the box. Since Moray's right at his side, Slarby makes a sharp turn that flips him over yet again, so I pop him up, scoop him up, and pin him. The fight enters the last 10 seconds during my pin, so it looks like I avoid any engagements after this to be safe, as the fight goes to the judges. At the time, this was the most tense fight I had ever had. You can see how relieved I was that it was over. You can also see that I was incredibly happy with and surprised by how that fight went. Moray won the decision. This has to be one of my favorite fights. I'm very proud of my driving in that fight because I think I did a great job avoiding going head-on while also keeping the pressure on him the whole time. I'm especially happy with how I capitalized on a lot of moments very quickly, which let me take control of most of the fight. Moray was constantly getting to the side of Slarby even if I couldn't get under him, which showed aggression but also ended up causing Slarby to gyro a lot because he would try to quickly turn away to get space. It didn't hurt that the Palm Beach Kit's little wedge setup isn't the best thing in the world, but I'm still very proud of my driving here. Look at how focused I was, and checking the clock during the pins. No notable damage was done in this one. As if this run wasn't already a shock, Moray was now in the fight for 4th place, meaning it was in the part of the bracket with only 1 fight per round, but more importantly, it was 1 win away from taking home 3rd. The robot standing in between Moray and a Motorama trophy was Turbo Smasher. It's a super compact vertical spinner that uses the same JCR hub motor as Moray. I had already fought plenty of solid, competitive robots, but Turbo Smasher truly felt like a robot that could win the whole thing and nobody would be surprised. It's super fast, and I knew I would have to be at the top of my game driving-wise. I talked to the builder, John, a lot at this event, and I love this little robot. He got stuck being the cage manager for a while. I don't know how that happened. I was of course really nervous for this fight, and it felt surreal being 1 win away from the podium, but I had hope because Moray has a good design for taking on Turbo Smasher. He's kind of a Cobalt style robot where his spinner's a bit higher up and requires you to ride up the wedge. This gave me a huge reach advantage since my fork should get under his wedge every time, and he's a pretty small robot which should make it easier to corral him. Let's see if Moray can do it. When the fight starts, Moray gets caught on the floor, so I get away from that spot and get a smothering pin complete with some aggressive tapping. Turbo Smasher is so small that I have to do my little spin to shake him off my forks. I quickly get another pin that pushes Turbo Smasher up the wall. When I release, his wheel guards let him get stuck there, and I think he might get counted out, but spinning his weapon frees him. It can't free him from Moray though. This is one of my favorite moments as a control bot, because swinging Turbo Smasher around on my forks causes the gyroscopic force of his weapon to flip him over. I stay pointed in the right direction and pin Turbo Smasher again. Here you can see where I would have driven forward, but I changed plans to drive around that bad spot on the floor. I keep Turbo Smasher at a distance for a while and shove it around before he rides up Moray's forks enough to take him to the wall and pin him. He flips over, allowing Moray to tap the most vulnerable part. I feed a spinner into the kick plate, trying to break it. Like the Slarby fight, I'm right under Turbo Smasher when he self-rights, giving him no room to breathe. Moray's fork gets jammed into a gouge in the floor, and lucky for me, Turbo Smasher was stuck on my forks until I got free. I almost get hit, but turn around for a pin. And tapping. The release is fun with a lot of gyro, and I'm careful to avoid that hole in the floor. Moray gets another great pin and feather where Turbo Smasher gets stuck a little bit on the release. But then for the first time all event, one of my forks gets hit. It's not touching the floor anymore, and half my drive dies again. In the last 10 seconds, Turbo Smasher flips Moray and lands a nasty hit to the backside that rips the feather off, but Moray ends the fight even with half drive, pinning Turbo Smasher when it goes to a judge's decision. Moray obviously dominated that whole fight until the very end, but Turbo Smasher did a lot in those couple of hits. I was worried, especially when they announced it was a split decision, but the winner was Moray, guaranteeing me 3rd place or higher. That was another fight where I'm really proud of my driving because I didn't allow Turbo Smasher to get to my side once until the drive issues at the end. It was fun to fight such a compact little robot with that much gyro because my super wide design made it easier to smother him, and the long forks let me spin him around when I released pins. Turbo Smasher did a lot of damage, tearing through the thin backside and pulling out the screws, but luckily he didn't hit anything inside the robot. He also cut through the carbon fiber top plate on that big hit. You could see a scratch from where the steel fork got hit, but it was only cosmetic. The poor 9-gram servo finally broke because it was crying out for help. That was another incredibly satisfying fight for me, and now I honestly didn't fully care what happened next because I made it to the top 3 at a huge event. It was also much later than it should have been, and everybody wanted to go to bed at this point. In the loser's final, Moray had to fight Wamp, a modified Weta kit, I think. This would technically be a rematch since Spinner Moray lost to Wamp back in May of 2025. Wamp got impulsed in the winner's final, so it was having a lot of issues in the pits. So many issues, in fact, that there were 45 minutes in between the Turbo Smasher fight and the Wamp fight. I was the one to go tell the event staff that Wamp had to push, and when I said Wamp has to push, Ed told me, no they don't. And on the downtime, I very poorly, now that I'm seeing it again, solder welded the back of Moray back together and taped the feather onto the top plate for good luck, since it had served me so well all day. I didn't want to go through the trouble of attaching a new servo, so I left the broken one taped on. This robot made it to the top 3. It looked like Wamp probably wouldn't be at 100% in our fight, and apparently Impulse was already configured to fight Moray in the final with a different setup than it would have used against Wamp. Even without all the last-minute repairs, I liked my chances against Wamp since my steel fork should be good at deflecting his drum. Everyone except a few event staff and the 3 remaining robots had left because it was so late. Alright, let's see if Moray made it to the grand final with a servo that's still squealing.
Box is locked. It looks like everybody is also tapped in. So, red square, are you ready? Raise your hand. Blue square, are you ready? Raise your hand.
When the fight starts, Wamp seems to be fully functional, but Moray starts off strong with a pin. Moray goes in for another and jams up his drum. After this, it looked like Wamp's drum had stopped working, making things easy for Moray. I chase him around, and when I finally catch him, his drum comes back to life. However, Moray has control, and Wamp gets flipped when he hits my fork. Moray pops Wamp into the air by feeding its fork into his downward spinning weapon, showing the confidence I had in those forks. I bring his spinner to a stop again, and again with a pin this time. One of my TPU forks gets stuck and lets Wamp get free. Moray pushes its opponent and bounces him around on the forks for a while, but I lose an eel head and half drive. Even with half drive, I prevent Wamp from getting any hits, and even fully scoop him up. Wamp gets its first decisive hit of the match, flipping Moray, but he doesn't land a follow-up before Moray self-rights and sends the fight to the judges while underneath Wamp. I was worried about the outcome, and I was right to be because Wamp won that fight and eliminated Moray. Now I do have to say, I do not agree with that decision. Even with half drive, Moray controlled pretty much the entire fight. I don't agree with giving the win to a robot that got a total of 1 hit throughout the fight. I also feel like I was more aggressive by chasing Wamp down, and even with 1 drive side, I was constantly engaging. I don't care that much because Wamp is of course a deserving robot. I made it this far, and it meant I could go to the hotel and fall asleep. In terms of damage, the TPU forks were a little worn, same with the edges of the steel ones, but they worked perfectly throughout that entire fight. The uprights also had some chunks taken out of them. Even with the decision being a little odd to me, that was still a very fun fight. So that's it for Moray at Motorama 2026. Impulse won the grand final in a pretty close battle, meaning Lars won every weight class once again. I really wonder what would have happened if Moray got to fight Impulse. This is one of my favorite events because there were so many surprises and ups and downs. Moray went 6-2, boosting its lifetime record, putting it at number 87 in RCE rankings for the year, and meaning it had the most fights out of any of the ants at Motorama this year. It got to the point where every fight was a Moray fight for a while. I went into this not expecting much for obvious reasons, but came out feeling great about this design. I even considered keeping Moray like this, but decided to keep it as a spinner and have these control bot parts as a backup. As for the motor failures, Moray was doing a lot of pushing, so I guess it's not too surprising so many burnt out, especially with those ground scraping forks on. I bought a bunch of new ones, and have had very few issues with motors burning out since this event. The main takeaways were that weaponless control bots are kind of the best because you have so much weight to make them huge and durable, and that driving is even more important than I thought. I think my driving has really come a long way, and I'm definitely building robots that drive a lot better now. I'm really glad people seem to enjoy this new version of Moray because in the chat a lot of people were talking about it, debating what happened to the spinner, and talking about it a decent amount. The feather made it really popular at this event. I'm really glad I made that stupid little weapon because it just made it so much more fun, and everybody loved to watch it start tapping, everybody laughed. I hope this event showed you that even if something goes wrong, if you focus and put effort into a plan B, you don't have to give up all hope in the design. I never thought I would take home a trophy from Motorama of all events with a 9-gram servo taped to the top of my robot. This was a lot of fun and I can't wait for Motorama next year, but for now, thank you for watching. All DMV podium showing these Pennsylvanians who's boss.